Alright, what's going on everybody? I'm back with another anime review. The subject of today's video is an anime that failed to rise in popularity here in the States during its initial run and ended way too soon. World Trigger is an anime adaptation of the science fiction adventure manga by Daisuke Ashihara. Toei Animation handled the animation, while Ocean Productions, yes, the same Ocean Productions responsible for the infamous Dragon Ball Z dub years ago, produced the English dub. Back in December of last year, it was announced at Jump Festa that World Trigger will be getting a new season. I recently decided to give the series a try after stumbling onto pictures of the manga covers while browsing the Viz Media app on my phone. Today's review will focus on both seasons of World Trigger, excluding the anime exclusive filler arc, which I decided to skip. However, if you would like for me to talk about that in a future video, then let me know. I plan to go back and watch the filler arc one day regardless. Before I get into my thoughts on the show, I'll briefly summarize the show's plot for those of you who haven't seen it yet. 4 years ago, a gate to another world opened in Mikado City, and creatures referred to as neighbors rampaged throughout the city. Those that protected the city during the invasion formed an organization now known as Border. Border is responsible for dealing with any neighbors that come through the gates that seem to appear at random. Border members fight using a special technology called a trigger that uses Tryon energy. A teenager named Osamu Makumo, who is a C-rank Border agent, meets and befriends a mysterious boy named Yuma Kuga, who reveals that he's a neighbor. Osamu decides to help Yuma adjust to life in his world and keep his secret after Yuma saves him from a neighbor in the restricted zone of the city. I really like the initial setting and plot of World Trigger. I like the idea of monsters coming over from the gates that appear randomly and agents using advanced weaponry to fight them. The first 2 seasons of World Trigger take place entirely in Mikado City. Knowing this fact might lead you to believe that the scale of this show and its world is quite small, but thankfully that isn't the case. The show moves at a deliberately slow pace, introducing new lore every couple of episodes and expanding on concepts presented in previous episodes. New information is conveyed effectively through visuals and dialogue. After an episode concludes, there is a small segment that usually summarizes and sometimes elaborates on new ideas or information presented in the episode. I appreciate the effort put in to ensure that the audience has a good grasp on new lore, and these segments may even expand on character-specific details as well. Ashihara does a great job thoroughly introducing new ideas and expanding on the mysterious other world where Yuma and the other neighbors come from, referred to as the neighborhood. The neighborhood is described and presented as this expansive space where many planet nations exist. Although we don't get to see much of the neighborhood, and what is shown is usually through flashbacks or still images or told through character dialogue, it's still very intriguing. I'm hoping we'll get to actually see some of the planet nations described in the series so far very soon in the next season. World Trigger's first 2 seasons can be broken up into 5 arcs: the introduction, Black Trigger capture, border enlistment, large scale invasion, and B-rank battles. The introduction arc is the weakest in terms of quality, but things improved after the first episode of the Black Trigger capture arc. The writing was fine aside from a scene at school in episode 2 where background characters spout exposition in a clumsy way, essentially explaining the plot of the show again to Yuma and the viewers watching the show. The weakest aspect of World Trigger is its production, and most of its early episodes are brought down because of it. Something just kind of feels off about it, and I'm not quite sure whether it's fair to put all the blame on Ocean Productions. Throughout the series, there are minor instances of odd pacing during certain scenes and poor direction. For example, at certain points during the first episode, there are these weird pauses between dialogue in addition to no background music or adequate sound effects. At these moments, the episode felt unfinished and poorly edited. Episodes 5 and 9 each have a scene that is oddly paced. In episode 5, there is a scene where border administrators are discussing Osamu's unauthorized use of his trigger at school to protect his friends from neighbors. Chief Commander Kido asks Osamu whether he would break the rules again under the same circumstances. There is time wasted on showing the expression of every character in the room, and then the focus is on Osamu for almost 20 seconds. There is supposed to be an initial pause there because Osamu is taking a moment to think. However, the moment lasted much longer than necessary for what is intended to be a brief pause. In episode 9, there is a scene where border administrators order a high-ranking agent named Yuichi Jin to seize Yuma's Black Trigger. After him and Osamu are given their orders and leave the room, the camera stays on the border administrator Katsumi Kurosawa for what feels like a whole minute with nothing happening. It may seem like I'm nitpicking, but these weirdly executed moments like these occur a few more times later in the series, and they bring down the quality of the show overall. Thankfully, these issues become less frequent after the first arc, and I didn't notice any more of these moments like these after episode 31. In episode 31, there was this moment when the neighbor from the Planet Nation Aftocrator named Inidora was speaking to Board Administrator Shinoda. There was this long pause before the character delivered the next line. I don't want to claim that Ocean Productions was to blame for these awkwardly executed moments, especially since I haven't watched the subtitle version of the anime yet. It's a possibility that these issues exist across all versions. Regardless, Ocean's dub for World Trigger is really inconsistent in terms of quality and voice acting. Perhaps I've been spoiled by companies like Funimation and Viz Media, but some of the voice work in World Trigger is terrible. I swear that some of these actors were simply just reading their lines, especially the voice actors for some of the operators. The voice actors for Sayoko Shiki, Hikari Nirai, and Shiori Usami are the best among the border operators. Most are bad or just kind of flat. The same could be said for the random extra background characters. One of the worst instances of voice acting in the show is during a flashback in episode 6 with Chika's childhood friend. It literally sounded like someone altered the audio pitch, giving it a chipmunk-like sound to the character's voice. I don't know if they messed with her recording, but either way it sounded terrible. On the other hand, the voice acting for some of the main characters and more important side characters is much better. Andrew Francis is perfect as Yuichi Jin, conveying his laid-back and lighthearted personality, but nailing his more serious moments as well. I thought that Kathy Westluck did a great job too, capturing the curiosity and confidence of Yuma Kuga. The voice of Light Yagami himself, Brad Swell, does a great job doing the voice for the leader of the Arashiyama squad, Jun Arashiyama. The voice actors for Shuji Miwa, Ai Kitara, Raiji, Kazaki, Kage, and the Natsu squad, with the exception of maybe Akane Hiyura, deserve recognition as well. The voice actors for Osamu and Kirie Konami also give solid performances. Aside from the inconsistent voice acting and occasional oddly paced scenes, I really enjoyed World Trigger's story and characters. From a character design perspective, I'll admit that there are some really generic looking designs for some side and tertiary characters. A few look very similar to characters that I've seen in other shows, most notably Border Administrator Takami Rindo. When I first saw this character, I was thinking to myself, hold on, where have I seen this guy before? Then it hit me. He looks exactly like Leorio from Hunter x Hunter and Maze Hughes from Fullmetal Alchemist. He's probably the worst offender when it comes to unoriginality, at least. However, there are some really good designs among some of the main and side characters. Yuma Kuga, Shuji Miwa, Masato Kagura, Ai Kitara, Yosuke Yonea, Raiji, Kirie Konami, Ko Murakami, and the Natsu squad are some of the standouts among the border agents. I'd even include Osamu, despite him not having the coolest looking design for a main character, because the design really fits his character. I also really like the designs for the humanoid neighbors from Aftocrator and the designs of the Tryon soldiers that pass through the gates. The neighbor designs are among the most unique in the series, which should be expected since they're essentially aliens from another world. As for the characters in general and how they were written, I was most impressed by how Ashihara handles his characters in terms of relevancy, power scaling, and growth. World Trigger introduces many side characters from Border throughout the series, and at first I thought that most of them would quickly become irrelevant as the story progressed. The show tends to introduce many characters at once, and it will likely take you a while to start remembering their names and faces. The series really focuses a lot on Border as an entity, and the different squads within each of its 3 branches. One thing I love about this show is that unlike some shonen series where only a few characters are viable fighters and outclass the majority of the main cast, almost every character has something to contribute in combat, and even the side characters play a critical role in key points in the story. No one aside from maybe Jin or Tsukihiko Amo are insanely OP, and even then, the show makes it clear that one person is limited in what they can do alone. They aren't invincible, and someone as weak as the main protagonist Osamu isn't necessarily useless and can be just as big as a threat with the right team and strategy in place. The large-scale invasion arc was excellent in terms of showcasing how formidable border agents are when working as a team, even against much stronger opponents. I really like how Ashihara emphasizes strategy and teamwork in World Trigger's battles as opposed to brute strength and special abilities. World Trigger's tournament arc, the B-rank battles, consist entirely of B-rank squads fighting against each other in a battle royale where strategy and teamwork is key. As a big fan of early Naruto, I really enjoyed seeing characters formulate and execute plans to deal with multiple teams. From a combat perspective, characters get stronger by learning from their mistakes, learning how to utilize the different trigger options available to them, and incorporating the new knowledge into a battle strategy. This approach is much different from shows like Dragon Ball Z, where a character reaching the next form through increasing their power level is enough the majority of the time. In terms of meaningful character development, Osamu, Chika Amatori, Shuji, and Shun Midorikawa are the only ones that experience any significant change. Osamu constantly struggles with the fact that he's weak and doesn't want to be a burden on Chika and Yuma. This desire to improve leads him to ask members of higher ranking squads for assistance constantly, but eventually by the end of season 2, he learns that he can contribute to his squad and improve in other ways. Chika doesn't want anyone to help her out given the issue that she has faced for years and what has happened to her brother and her friend in the past. She eventually decides that she wants to be stronger herself and is willing to let Osamu and Yuma help her out. She also struggles with something else involving combat, but I won't say what it is to avoid spoiling it. Shun changes after his fight with Yuma, but Shuji's character development sort of just happens off screen. Out of all the characters that I just mentioned, I think Shuji probably could have used a bit more screen time. Characters such as Yuma and Shiro are fleshed out through flashbacks and don't really undergo an arc throughout the 2 seasons. Regardless, my favorite characters are Yuma, Jin, Kirie, Kyosuke, and Aikitara. Yuma is an excellent character overall. He's confident, laid back, and not afraid to speak his mind. I enjoyed seeing him slowly adapt to life in Japan, and the revelations about his father and the flashbacks to his time in the neighborhood is interesting. Plus, he's involved in some of the series' best fights, which I'll mention briefly later. Jin is not just the typical cool, powerful male character. He's a laid-back, likable, cunning master manipulator and one of the strongest agents in Border. His fights in the Black Trigger capture arc were great. I really like the personalities of Kirie and Kyosuke and their interactions with each other and the rest of Border's Tamakoma branch. Ashihara nails the humor with these 2 characters. Characters constantly try to trick Kirie because of how gullible she is, while Kyosuke loves to lie and trick the people, especially Kirie. These characters were not only good for comedy relief, but they have their moments in battle too and are a formidable A-rank team. I've grown to really like Aikitara despite her being really arrogant and prideful. I like that we get to see glimpses of her insecurities, like the fact that she has this need to be acknowledged by those around her in combat, as well as some lighthearted moments with Osamu and Kyosuke. Before I wrap up this review, I'd like to touch briefly on the animation, soundtrack, and narration. The animation was decent for the most part, although it does get better in small bursts during certain fights throughout the series. The best fights in the series occur in the Black Trigger capture, large-scale invasion, and the B-rank battle arcs. One of the best fights early on is Jin and Arashiyama squad versus the Kazama, Miwa, and Tachikawa squads. That moment when Kazama does a spin attack on Jin while he's trying to defend against Tachikawa's attacks, that just caught me completely off guard. The animation there was just clean. Some great fights in the large-scale invasion arc include, but are certainly not limited to, Yuma vs. Counselor Visa, Ramanin vs. Azuma, Yonea, and the other agents. Each round of the B-rank battles had its share of awesome fights, such as Yuma vs. Ko vs. Yuko, and a 3-way confrontation between the Ninomiya squad and Osamu in round 4. World Trigger's soundtrack was composed by Kenji Kawai. It's nothing too impressive, but it captures the spirit of the series perfectly. The main theme was at least memorable, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. You can hear bits of the theme throughout some of the tracks, and I preferred those tracks instead. Track 14, Border Sortie, Track 4, Talented, Elite, and Track 17, Confrontation with Neighbors, were the ones that really stuck out for me. There was also Track 16, Fun Days, which is a very upbeat track that kind of sounds like it would fit in the old Mega Man Battle Network games. While I'm on the subject of music, I'll take this time to briefly touch on the show's 3 openings. The English translated version of these songs aren't as good as the original Japanese version. I didn't really like a lot of the translated cheesy lyrics. The worst one was the first opening, regardless of the version. You can really tell that they were working with a limited budget with the first 2 openings. The second opening in English, that did eventually grow on me, but the third opening is by far the best, and the English vocals can't do it justice. You can really tell the difference in quality between the third opening and the other 2. The last thing I want to touch on is the narration. The narrator for the Ocean dub is bland, and for the lack of a better word, basic sounding. Combined with scene pacing problems and some bad voice acting as mentioned earlier, the narrator contributes to the show feeling low budget. Additionally, I feel like some of the recaps could have been shortened in some episodes during the large-scale invasion arc. Overall, World Trigger is a solid series with exciting, strategic combat, a fascinating, expansive world, and excellent lore building, likable characters, and a great story. I can't help but feel like this show would be so much better with a bigger budget and perhaps a different animation studio, and most of all, a better company handling the English dub. To be honest, I wouldn't mind if the show were to be rebooted with a whole different team handling the animation and dubbing, but as of now, we're stuck with Toei and Ocean Productions for Season 3. Nevertheless, I think World Trigger would be a great anime to show someone who's just trying to get into anime, as the show is quite accessible and has a certain charm to it with its humor. I definitely recommend this show to any fans of science fiction or the shonen genre, especially if you like Bleach or early Naruto. Anyway, if I had to give this anime a score, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think about World Trigger in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. I apologize for the quality of the audio in this video, but thank you guys for watching this video anyway. Like the video, subscribe. I'm out of here. Peace.